All right. It seems as though we are live. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Welcome to another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. This is Raf. I welcome you to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about SMBs and security, a much forgotten, or at least not often talked about topic. I have a great guest. Before we get rolling, while I have your attention, and you can't skip past me, I guess you could. If you aren't subscribed to the LinkedIn page, please do so. I post some content there that would be perhaps of interest to you. I try not to spam folks, but there's some good podcast content in there, and the usual social channels on Twitter/X or whatever it's called today. And I'm gonna try some other places, but LinkedIn seems to be the best place. All right. So without further ado, Mr. Dominic Vogel, I've been trying to get you. We've been kind of contemplating having you on the show for forever, but here you are.
Well, I'm so happy to be here, Raf. I'm humbled to be here, and thank you for contemplating me forever and allowing me to come on.
Well, it's good to have you. This is I don't want to say ignored. It's a tough topic, right? The SMB space is just a tough topic for a couple of reasons. I think the not, I mean, not for nothing, but the most obvious one is it's just not a place where you're going to go make a lot of money really fast, right? So it's obviously no surprise to me that the big companies, the big software manufacturers, the security companies, the consultancies just simply don't go there. And yet, the challenges that SMBs have echo throughout the halls of all the large enterprises as their providers, supply chains, and whatnot. With that, I will leave you to give me a quick intro and then take it away.
Well, I appreciate that, Raf, and you're absolutely right. SMB and security don't get into that field to get rich. I've had this shirt for almost 20 years, so you're absolutely right. Not about getting rich, but very quick intro about myself. So I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, even though today I'm choosing to wear a Tampa Bay hat. But that's just my lucky go-to hat. I've been in cybersecurity almost 20 years. Oddly enough, I spent first half of my career in corporate, so working in big companies, and it was actually because I had such a terrible corporate experience that I decided to focus on small mid-sized organizations. And over the past 10 years, I've been developing CyberSecurity, which is my advisory company, and we're just exclusively working with small businesses. I love working with small businesses because I get to work with business owners, executives, people who, to them, their company is everything. And to me, it's just about having much more real conversations. It doesn't seem corporate, for lack of a better term. It's real, it's authentic, and that's why, like I said, I've chosen to focus on that space over the past decade. And the past few years, I've also started a coaching practice focusing on really helping mainly tech professionals and cybersecurity professionals just try to go beyond their technical skill set and be better at communicating to non-technical people, stuff like branding, that type of stuff. So that is me in a nutshell.
Yeah. So it good intro, because that coaching bit certainly probably comes in handy when you're trying to explain some tough technical concepts to people, to a business owner, which probably doesn't quite, if they're unless they're in cyber, which I'm guessing most of them aren't. It becomes a pretty tough conversation on day one, right?
Yep.
So look, let's start with this. How the hell do we overcome this issue where the small org doesn't get the love that it needs? We could argue that these are the building blocks, right? If you don't secure the building blocks, the big companies are just even more vulnerable. Yeah. And I've made that argument before, but technology is just all that tech is built. It's built and priced for, the $10 million deal, the $100 million deal. It's not meant for a company with 10 people. So where do you even begin?
That's a really good question, Raf. To answer that question, I'm going to take a bit of a circular path there, if you don't mind.
Go
But
wherever you need to go, man.
yeah, to me, when I started focusing on small businesses or smaller businesses, I found that I'll just say the traditional security consulting community was not serving them well. Basically, what I was finding is that most small and mid-sized organizations would pay a lot of money for a 300-page report, which may have worked really well in corporate, rubber stamp and work its way up the audit committee. But for a small, mid-sized organization, they were always left wondering, okay, what do we do now? And when that same company would come back next year, that same company would be like one of the big four or one of the other bigger brands that would cost a lot of money. You get this really cool, fancy looking report, which again works well in corporate, but again they would come back the following year and no progress was made. Why? Because that small and mid-sized business said we couldn't make heads or tails out of this report, and then they would just pay basically every year, and nothing would change. So
right.
that was sort of what led to me sort of creating my company and focusing on what I feel is important at the SMB level is pragmatic. Not let's not worry about here's this cybersecurity framework. Here's the 400 things you're not doing. Boiling that down and saying here's 2 things. If we're going to accomplish 2 things this year, here's what it should be when it comes to cyber risk management, and here's why. And that's why I started trying to really focus my conversations with our prospects and with our clients, and really just getting to the crux of why should this matter? Why do you care at this point in time around cybersecurity? And right now, it's mainly reactive pain for small and mid-sized businesses. So it's either after a breach, after being denied cyber insurance, after having a contract denied because they found out, that a key customer was saying, hey, we're going to be looking at cybersecurity now, and you know what? Turns out you guys aren't taking it seriously. So you have 6 months to ship up, or we're to shape up, or we're shipping out, kind of thing. So very reactive. But really, like I said, the heart of to answering your question, it just boils down to the pragmatic. Why should we care? Why do we give a flying F around this?
So that's interesting because you're coming in. So, all right, I want to address both sides of this conversation. So, the one where you started off is for those small businesses. Why do they care? And why should they spend money? And more importantly, I think the next fundamental is where should they spend money, right? Because it's always about spending. They have to allocate people and money.
Yep.
That's a foregone conclusion.
Yep.
So what's the magic? Like, what's the magic formula? Because I got to tell you, having worked for a small-ish, in fact, the smallest consultancy I ever worked for was 4 people at the time.
Yep.
So that's pretty small. And we targeted those smaller organizations, but man, it is tough. Now, arguably, this is 20 years ago. So I think things have probably changed as awareness has gone up. But trying to convince somebody that has, they're running a local dentist office, they're running a local plumber shop, the Joe Everybody, right? That typical small business owner, convincing them that they should not spend money on buying another truck or reallocating their lunch budget for the month to go buy something else. That's a hard sell.
Yeah.
How do you get through that conversation without having to be like, bad things will happen if you don't do this, right? The hand wavy alarmist thing.
Yeah. And that's a really good question, Raf. And having focused on this area for the past 10 years, what I really have learned was that the proactive approach doesn't work, right? Like honestly, it's like a doctor trying to convince someone who they know is going to have a heart attack to try and change their lifestyle. They're like, no, I'll wait for you to have the heart attack, then you'll have to come to Jesus or whatever deity you choose to believe in moment, and then we'll help you focus on that. That's what I have seen, especially over the past 2 years. I've noticed that the vast majority of our prospects come to us reactively. So we're just really focusing on being prepared to help them. And the only thing that's really helped me over the past 10 years is basically cyber criminals now focusing on small and mid-sized businesses. The velocity, the veracity, the volume of the attacks at the SMB level, that is what has helped us, because selfishly, I should say, has helped. But going back 10 years ago, most of the small mid-sized organizations, they weren't getting hit by stuff like ransomware and all that stuff.
That's
Today,
fair.
just because of that volume, like our phones ringing off the hook all the time because of companies getting hit by ransomware, and companies that 10 years ago I never thought we would entertain as clients. One of my favorite stories to share is that there was a porta potty company that called, and they said, we just got hit by ransomware, we're in this terrible situation. And I said, oh, would you say this was a shitty situation? Because that was a perfect pun. I just couldn't pass up the opportunity on that. And they're like, yeah, this is a pretty shitty situation that we're stuck in here. And we help them through that. But it just goes to show you that it's every company, companies that you would not have thought, like I said, as a practitioner 10 years ago, I would never have thought we would be doing work with a porta potty company. But that's where we are right now. Every company is a digital company. So it's being able to help them at that reactive moment rather than trying to teach proactiveness, because it's falling on deaf ears.
Huh. I don't know if I've heard a better case for let the kid touch the stove and then be ready with the ointment, because they're gonna have to. You're right though. I've been in that position where you're like, guys, this is gonna happen and it's gonna be bad, and they're like, maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I got to make payroll. And then it happens, and they're like, all right, it happened. Help.
Yeah.
And I think the key is to be, to anticipate the needs of the okay, now what?
Yes.
Request, because it as you stated, it's coming. What segment of, I mean, you're up in the Canadian wilderness there of just kidding. No, I mean, Canada's a little different than the US, but what market segments do you see primarily learning their lesson the fastest, the most effectively, however you want to couch that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and the one that I have seen the greatest, I'll say, interest / growth in at least from our prospects and clients' perspective is manufacturing. Manufacturing for the longest time was basically a death knell, right? No matter how badly I wanted to break into that sector, we could not land a client. No one, we're saying, hey, you know what? Investing in cybersecurity is going to take money away from our factory floor or what have you. We're not.
Yeah.
We have no desire to do this. We have cyber insurance, right? We're fine. Leave us alone, right? The past, I'm going to say 18 to 24 months, we've added more manufacturing clients than in the previous 8 years combined. Main reason, a couple factors that I've seen in that. So one is more organizations being denied cyber insurance because they're not meeting basic requirements. I've had a lot of organizations, particularly in manufacturing, who said, we need cyber insurance. Turns out we didn't realize we could not do nothing. It turns out we have to do the basics, right? Then this acronym MFA, no one's telling us what it is. Can you please help us get this on so we can get cyber insurance, right? We've seen it a lot. Another driving force, and this is sort of that trickle down effect from enterprise or corporate down into smaller businesses and broader just vendor risk management and supply chain risk management, is more and more we're seeing these manufacturing companies that live and die with RFPs. They're now realizing that they have to respond to the security requirements. One of my favorite stories to share to illustrate this point, there's a fairly large manufacturing company out in Western Canada, and they exclusively get their business through RFPs. They live and die through RFPs, and they had told us that there were always security requirements in these RFPs, but they would just answer them very generically. Or more recently, they said they would use ChatGPT and said, oh, here's our incident response plan. And they use ChatGPT to put out an incident response plan. But what happened was, with an absolutely critical RFP, they ended up losing out on it. And the reason why, they were told, was because you weren't taking security seriously. We could tell these answers were fake and generic. We're not moving forward. And the CEO had, again, that come to Jesus / whatever your deity is type moment. And he called and he said, we are going to lose everything because I've been told that RFPs or security requirements in RFPs are actually now important, that we can't ignore them anymore. Please help us. And the funny thing with that was that they said, we have an RFP due tomorrow. Can we list your company as a VC? So we're like, no, you can't, but we're happy to help you in a bigger journey here. So this has been, like I said, those are pain points, and they're not the type of the usual fear, uncertainty, doubt of hacking or ransomware and that type of thing. What's really been interesting with the manufacturing sector is that the main reaction pains have not been because of a cyber attack or ransomware. It's because of having cyber insurance denied or losing out business through RFPs and not taking security.
Okay, let's pursue those two, because we have on this show a couple of times I've had the conversation of Tuma and Sean Scranton have been out, and we talked about the fact that cyber insurance may be the thing that finally kind of gives the good heave ho and pushes us over the top of the roller coaster so we can enjoy the ride for a bit. Although I think I used the word enjoy there ironically, perhaps. But cyber insurance getting denied for a company that assumed that it could just rely on cyber insurance has got to be one hell of an ironic wake up, right? Like you go to you go to get a policy because you didn't want to do a whole lot of security, and they're like, hey, you didn't do enough security, you can't have the policy. And they're sort of like, wait, what? But hold on, didn't we just talk about, I don't know, like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I forget how many episodes ago, and now, by the way, we're not the only ones that did this, but how this is not an either or. It's not like you buy insurance or you do security. You do one so that the other one's easier, and then you use those together in a strategy. Did nobody tell the SMB this?
No. And what's really funny, Raph, too, is that, I'm not sure if funny is the right word, but I'll use the word funny for right now. But what's funny is that many of them just didn't take the questionnaires that a lot of those cyber insurance reach out to them or use. There's no demand of proof, there's no burden of proof. It's do you, to the best of your knowledge, are you using XYZ? And honestly, I know we have at least multiple organizations, prospects, that had told us that they basically were extending the truth on their cyber insurance just so they could get it. And I was like it's just, as a practitioner, it makes my mind just blow up. But it's not surprising because they see it as a monopoly get out of jail card. And the thing is, they're not properly educated or informed or made aware of the fact that this is a risk management tool, right? But you need to, and again, it's basic risk. You're using this to deal with residual risk. Take the steps to reduce the inherent risk, and then whatever you can't, then you insure it. It's basic stuff. But you add the word cyber in front of it, and people lose their mind, right? Like, it's like they don't understand. For any other element of risk in their organization, they're taking proper risk management steps. But you add the word cyber in front of it, it's like everyone loses the ability to speak or think critically. And it's just really, to me, illustrated a point that they don't truly see it as a risk, especially like at the SMB level. They see it as something that's almost like a mild annoyance. Oh, here's cyber insurance that'll help us deal with it. But I can't tell you how many times I feel calls from people who are honestly crying, saying, we thought we had cyber insurance, we didn't realize we had to actually do X, Y, Z. We got hit by ransomware and our claim was denied because we weren't meeting the basic thresholds. And they're like, can you help us? I'm like, yeah, I could have helped you before, but not much we can do now. Right?
Well, so what do you even like? Where are the failings? Like, okay, let's say they come to you and they say, Dominic, we need help.
Yep.
What's step one? Like, where do you go? What are they missing? Please don't say everything.
Well, to me, we're still in an age where most small, mid-sized businesses are struggling with the basics, right? Even stuff like multi-factor authentication. Can't tell you, Raph, how many times we go into an organization and MFA is either not enabled or it's configured for some people, but not for like the CEO, the executives. They're all exempt from it, right? The highest risk,
of course,
account, right? And what really bothers me about conversations around like stuff like AI as an example, right? And I've heard this from more than one business owner at the SMB space, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm so worried about AI. All these AI threats, they're gonna bring down our organization." These are organizations, like I said, that are struggling to do the basics. And I always paint them a picture. I say, think of two freight trains barreling towards you. One is, just basic run-of-the-mill security threats. That's about to smash you in the face. The AI train, you can't even see. It is literally hundreds and hundreds of miles down the path, down the track. You can't see that yet. By the time that train gets to you, you'll already be flattened to a pancake, right? Let's focus on the basics and do them well. So to your point there, Raf, where we focus on is really just laying basic foundational again, term cyber hygiene, the basics. MFA, what is the most critical data? Where does it live? Who has access to it? Right? Basic stuff that should have been done eons ago. So it's really about just trying to do the basics and do them well. That's what I'm still seeing with a lot of SMBs.
All right, of course it's the basics. and I'd love to say, well, gee, that seems like an SMB problem, but no, that's a problem. Period. Like that's a problem across every size company, every demographic, every country, every vertical, every market, like everything, all over the place. It's nuts. But listen, when you start. Let me turn this a little bit. When you start having these conversations with a company that comes to you and says, all right, hey, look, I'm a janitorial service. I do online billing and online HR, and I have 50 employees, 30 employees. I just lost this contract with a big company because we can't afford cyber insurance because we don't have a security program. Okay, where do I go? Because I got to tell you, Dominic, the answer of like, okay, get EDR for all of your endpoints puts them out of business in most cases, right? Like the costs are stupid.
Yep.
So what do you do?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Raf. And you're absolutely right, because often a lot of the time people will react and think about technology first. When I've seen a lot of very small organizations who are like running very expensive platforms, like CrowdStrike as an example. We came across a 10-person accounting firm, and they were all running CrowdStrike, and the CEO said, "I don't have any other budget for anything else. Like this is almost like this is too much. We can barely afford it." I was like, "You don't need CrowdStrike. Who told you that you needed CrowdStrike?" And they said, "Well, we had a data breach, and our cyber insurer told us that we needed to run CrowdStrike for at least a year in order for them to honor the cyber insurance." So they did that, and they reached out at the point of renewal, and they said, "Well, do we still need CrowdStrike?" And we're like, "No, you don't. Like, don't get me wrong, great tool, but for a 10-person organization, that is literally the definition of overkill. Like that, you look it up in the dictionary, that's overkill." So when we're talking about the starting point for a lot of these organizations, it's not necessarily the technology. To me, the technology will come into play, but over sort of a multi-year approach here, the first thing is generally just cultural and risk. I refer to as risk acceptance and risk buy-in here, making sure that if there's a board, the executives, right, that we're elevating this beyond the, hey, this is for the IT guy or our outsourced service provider to deal with, right? Really trying to bring this through the lens of risk management. That's often where we focus much of our effort for year one, is just rewiring the culture of the organization to see this as a risk, just like personnel risk, operational, financial, really working with the business to understand that this is a risk. And then we focus our initial points on what are the most critical business processes of the organization? What makes this organization do the amazing things it's able to do? Then we just drill down. Okay, what are the systems that support these? Okay, now let's look at the right processes. Do these systems need better access controls around it? We try to, again, do the basics around that type of stuff. Encryption, right? No rocket science type stuff. We're not doing any hero type stuff. Throwing in some 6-figure solution. Maybe at some point that'll come down the road. But it's really, again, just trying to build that very strong, and sounds somewhat cliche, but that foundation. And again, we're prioritizing around the critical business processes. Yeah, we'll look at endpoints and all that other stuff down the road, but for most of these organizations, they just don't have the budget. So let's focus where we know that if they were to lose something, that it would be game over. And that's mapping it to a critical business process, which a business owner or executive is all too happy to talk about. They know what makes their organization tick.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Man, there's so much. There's so much here that can be boiled down to essentially, small companies have the same problems big companies do.
Yeah.
It's just minus all the budget and staffing, right? I mean,
yeah,
the problems don't change. And being able to afford solutions is just as important as being able to afford the aftermath of an incident. But I gotta say, like this is an area where in my career I have particularly spent time thinking about, because there's not a there's not a eloquent answer here, because in order, like, sure, everybody could go out, like those small companies, if they could get their hands on the latest and greatest technology from the latest and greatest managed service providers, then they are just as protected potentially as the biggest and the best, right? But the biggest and the best get popped all the damn time.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that telling us?
Yeah.
And I don't have, like, I wish I could create a company that did so my buddy Stan, who's on the podcast here, good Lord, a while ago, I'll remind you guys which episode. But we went to a company called Contraforce, or yeah, something like that. It's from the old video games. But they do, like, they're an MSP for like the small businesses, right?
Mhm.
And we were talking about it much like this, and the same answer really happens to be, how do you downscale the cost without downscaling the service provided or the technology provided? And that's not, and so, right, look, great service comes from humans operating. As you try to reduce costs, there's only so much you can do on the human aspect before you start introducing technology to mechanize the things that a person would do. Now, God help me for saying this, as we start bringing AI into more of these conversations, and if you're not watching this, you didn't see me do the air quotes, so I'm going to keep doing them until you can hear them in your head. As we start introducing AI into these conversations, maybe this is a spot where, like, the AI assistant can start doing things at a scale for a fraction of the cost of a human. Is it going to be the same type of analysis that a human can provide? I don't know. Maybe it's even better at some point when tech gets good enough. But it's got to be better. We need something better than, I installed this XYZ Acme endpoint tool because I don't understand anything about security. I followed the instructions. I installed it. Okay, I'm good now, right? Yay? No? You mean I didn't have to configure, have to watch it all the time? I have to update it, like, and tune it? Like, no, those things don't exist in this small company mindsets. It's frustrating. I mean, I could just talk myself into a tizzy here. I'm going to try not to. But it's frustrating because we want to solve the problem, but there's, not to be too capitalistic about it, but there's no money in it because that's not where the budgets are, except for when you can't do it at that small level, then the big companies that rely on the small companies start to have major problems.
Yeah.
So maybe in these, maybe small companies should just start charging more and have a cybersecurity tax, or like a cybersecurity surcharge on top of contracts. Like, I don't know, something that's got to happen. It's got to change the dynamic here, don't they?
It's really interesting that you bring that up, Raph, because one of the things that has been a very, this is me getting on my soapbox, frustrating, is that I see, especially when we're going through sort of like a procurement type process, most of our clients are B2B type organizations, and they generally sell to large organizations. The demands of what is being asked, from these large organizations, say, oh, you need to have this, and this. Like, the procurement process and the people asking these questions are so far removed from reality that it's extremely frustrating. I went through this process recently with an insurtech client of mine, and so I sold to the large insurance companies, and this large insurance or conglomerate, massive insurance company was basically saying, okay, no, we need you to have all these security tools in place. And these were all like enterprise level stuff. Right? And this my client, they're basically a team of 20. And I said to them, I said to the person at the large insurance company, I said, this doesn't make any sense. We're not even accessing your internal network, right? All you're really doing here is putting us through this pseudo random due diligence process here that is adding no risk reduction value to your organization. And if anything is pointing in the spot where you're going to lose out on innovation, because now you're choking out all the small organizations that can't possibly meet these unrealistic security requirements. And I would argue that most large organizations aren't even meeting these as well. Why would you lose out? You're at the risk of losing out on innovation. And that's where we see innovation with small organizations, because they're typically unencumbered by large cultural roadblocks or red tape or what have you. And I think to your point there, I think there's an ecosystem solution here where the larger organizations, and if they're going to be still tapping into the innovative nature of these small organizations, they need to help them out. Maybe it's taking more of a partnership approach and saying, hey, you're right here on your security journey, but we love what you do as a company. We'll help you get over the next few years, we'll help you get to a spot that's more realistic or something in line with our risk reduction or with our cyber risk metrics, rather than, like I said, that arbitrary, here's the 400 security requirements we demand that you adhere to, that, like I said, for an average 20-person organization it's not possible.
Yeah. What's funny is like that sponsorship kind of idea feels like the right thing to do, but like I can't see I just don't see how that actually translates into something that works and happens in real life. It's just, it feels like a lot of altruism that would have to happen. What kinds of resources besides you, what kind of resources the SMBs out there have? Like, where do they go? Where does a small company even go for help?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, and I guess there's sort of some different layers to that. Most small and mid-sized organizations rely heavily on their outsourced IT service provider, so an IT managed service provider. And unfortunately, with IT MSPs, that's it's a large mix of good, bad, and ugly, and very ugly. In which sometimes they're really good IT managed service providers who are very transparent, will speak non-technical talk, right, and will really help from a cyber risk reduction perspective for organizations. But I found a very small group. There's a lot of ugly IT service providers, and unfortunately, there's no barrier to entry. Anyone can set up an IT managed service provider, especially for small and mid-sized businesses, right, who are desperate for those types of services. There's no barrier to entry, right? There's no certification or anything that's preventing anyone from being an IT MSP. And often what we see with a lot of these IT MSPs, or the relationship with IT MSPs and small businesses, is that it's a very, I'll call it almost like a toxic relationship, where the business is just blindly trusting what the service provider is saying. And they'll say, oh, well, how do we know that you're doing things securely? And they'll just say, oh, just trust us, or that's why you're paying us. And I wish I was making these things up, but I'm not. Like, we hear this stuff all the time. And there's no third-party proof. They're not providing any documentation. Not saying, oh, well, we just recently went through this type of audit or assessment. Here are the results, so you can hold us accountable. That's not there, right? So there's a lot of broken relationships there. But in terms of, again, the services and things that smaller organizations can look at, in Canada, and I know this is true in other countries as well, the Canadian government has a lot of great services and just for small businesses that they can point to, right? In terms of, here's a starting point for an incident response plan. Right? Here's some starting policies. There's a lot of good resources. One of the things that I love using, and we use with a lot of our clients, is CIS. CIS has so many great resources. There's just stuff just up the wazoo there. A lot of good stuff that people often review and look at. Sometimes some of it's more technical, but I think there's a lot of great stuff there. And same thing with, like I said, the U.S. government has a lot of good services as well. But what I find is that, at least for Canadian SMBs, they're generally going to either their local chamber of commerce for materials or guidance, or they're going to, like I said, either the provincial or federal government website for cybersecurity guidance. That typically is where they're going.
All right, fair enough. And for somebody that's in an SMB listening right now, give them a piece of advice. Give them the top 3 things. Like, what are you going to tell them? If they're listening right now, what do you tell them? Like, hey, here's my sage wisdom. Give them some advice, man.
Number 1, don't wait for the heart attack, right? Like, act now, be proactive. And I realize that may be hard, especially during pre-recessionary or recessionary, wherever the hell we're calling this period of time. I recognize as a business owner that may be difficult to want to be investing in something you haven't invested in, but don't wait for the heart attack, because there's no guarantee you survive the heart attack. So that would be number 1. Number 2, and this probably won't come as a surprise to you, but I'll say it anyway for most SMB owners and executives, please turn on MFA. You're likely already on the MS stack. You're likely already in the MS365 stack. Just turn on MFA. You have it. You don't have to pay extra for it. Turn that on. Configure it for everyone right across the board. No exceptions. Turn that on. That is, if you're going to do anything, take any advice from this little rambling today, turn that on. Cannot tell you how many SMB attacks that we see that have had MFA being enabled would not have happened. Right? It's very simple, and like I said, you're already paying for it. Why not turn it on? And number 3 is understand your critical business processes, and understand, so even just take the time to map that out. Of my critical business processes, where does that data and or those supporting systems live? Do we maintain that? Does the service provider maintain that? Is it out in the cloud somewhere? Really understand where that data is, where those systems are, who has access to it, right? And take the time to just start digging in that. You can even just draw it out on a napkin if you want, but start going down that path. Well, what we have found is that leads to more questions, and that leads to executives and business owners saying, maybe we should be doing more. Just doing that exercise is going to be very eye-opening. So that to me would be my top 3.
All right, there you have it, folks. Mr. Vogel there giving you some really good advice. Dominic, thanks for being on the show, man. That's about the time we've got. It was a great conversation. I appreciate you shedding some insight.
Raph, that was fantastic. Huge fan of yours, and this was a huge experience for me to come on your podcast. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. All right, folks, thanks for listening. Hopefully, I would say, look, if you're in this position, the unenviable position of being a small, mid-sized business without having a tremendous amount of resources, but still got to get the work done, take heed of Dominic's advice here. Start somewhere. Don't wait for the heart attack. It's the life insurance gets really expensive after you've already died, and that's no joke. There's some things you can't do later. Be minimally proactive, but be proactive in some way, right? And you've got to get something done, and know what that something is. Find somebody you trust. Hopefully, this has helped shed some light. So, another episode done, and we will catch you guys another time, another place, on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Stay for some more great content, and cue the music.